Hey everybody, this is TJR. This morning I was greeted with the news that musician, vocalist, and songwriter Chris Cornell was dead at the age of 52. Got the news in a text when I woke up this morning, and for the rest of the day I've just been kind of processing that. Earlier in the day I listened to his last solo album, entitled Higher Truth, which, by the way, is a darn good album. You should go listen to it if you haven't yet. Then, of course, later in the day, I found out that the rumors were true and that the cause of death was suicide, and that apparently he had hanged himself not too long after doing a show with Soundgarden, a sold-out show, in fact. That night they closed the set with the Soundgarden song Slaves and Bulldozers, which included a refrain of In My Time of Dying by Led Zeppelin, ironically enough. The 90s grunge rock scene, I kind of see as, so far, one of the last really, huge rock movements that took a hold with the general public in a big way. Not to say that there isn't good rock music now, there's lots of it, but there hasn't been a real movement that's kind of like been captured or has been embraced by the mainstream and has, had a, then therefore has had a huge impact. And when I think of that time period, there are a lot of bands, some of whom made it big, some of whom did not make it big. There were lots of trailblazers. Some of them made it big, some of them didn't make it big. And so when I think about this time period, we tend to think about the bands that, of course, made a huge impact because they made it big. And I think of groups like Nirvana. I think of Kurt Cobain. I think of Alice in Chains, and I think of Lane Staley. I think of Stone Temple Pilots, and I think of Scott Weiland. And I think of, the fact that we've, lost 3 of the major voices, and now 4 with Chris Cornell. One of the few major voices left would be Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam. And so, this is very sad and kind of depressing news. It's shocking because it seemed like, Chris Cornell had found his way out of that dark tunnel, that he had cleaned up, he, along with, of course, he was on tour, of course, at the time with the reformed Soundgarden, but after Soundgarden had broken up, he had done a lot of other things besides Soundgarden. Of course, there was Temple of the Dog, and there was, of course, Audioslave. And he released 4 solo albums as well, plus a lot of other, work in between as well. There were groups that he produced and that sort of thing. And it kind of felt like he had, found his way out of that dark tunnel that maybe others like, Kurt Cobain and Lane Staley hadn't found their way out of that dark tunnel. But it felt like he had. And so that's what makes this even more, absolutely shocking and terribly, terribly sad. And apparently, even prior to that last show, or in the preceding, weeks and days, he had been releasing all these positive tweets about, the sold-out shows for the Soundgarden tour, and it just seems like things were definitely, uphill, and it just goes to show you can never know. You can never know what demons or darkness sometimes goes through a person's mind. It's hard for me to imagine. I've struggled very hard as a musician, and it's hard for me to imagine this when you see somebody who has achieved so much of which you wish you could have achieved as a musician and as a songwriter. And I don't. I've experienced this before. I experienced this before when, Amy Winehouse passed away. Some say, well, she didn't commit suicide. Well, in a way she did, in my opinion. It was a very kind of slow suicide, through addiction. But but I want to stress here, I'm not like chiding them or scolding them, like how dare you, you have so much to live for. I don't want to come off as judgmental because you and I have no idea what kind of darkness or demons a person is going through. And I know in my younger years, certainly there were times in my life when I came close to that too. I don't want to say suicide, but I mean just where you feel this depression, you feel this darkness inside of you. And so I know what it feels like to get close to that, but I've never gotten that close. And now, of course, I don't even know why I ever felt that way to begin with when there is so much to live for. And there really is. And if there's any lesson I take away from this is that, there's always plenty to live for. There really is. It may not seem like it and at times, but there really is. It's just a shame that some of these great music artists who have so much to live for couldn't see that, and it's just too bad. It's always sad when we lose someone like, David Bowie and James Brown and Johnny Cash, and but it's not always unexpected. James Brown, Johnny Cash, they had led very long, full lives. David Bowie's, I'll admit, was more shocking, but he was in his 70s. He had led a long and productive life. It just really felt like he was going to be with us a lot longer, though. But when it's like this, when we lose them, when there's still so much more life left for them, it is really sad, and especially when it's because they took their own lives. I'm speechless right now. Earlier I mentioned Kurt Cobain, Scott Weiland, Lane Staley. All of these pioneers of or icons of the grunge rock movement, whatever you want to call them, they all had really great voices, and they all had really unique characteristics to their voices that really set them apart. And so did Chris Cornell. If there was anything I was going to say about Chris Cornell beyond the fact that he was a good musician and a very good songwriter, in regards to just his singing voice, was just the tremendous range he had, the tremendous power that he had in his voice, and I think that also maybe a bit more R&B soulfulness into his voice as well. I think that that he would have fit along as easily during the classic rock era as he would, as he did during the 90s. I think his voice had more of what we heard in bands like, say, Led Zeppelin and Bad Company, where you had these, great, soulful, rock singers. And at any rate, though, he's going to be sorely missed. Today, you may have been wanting to remember, Chris Cornell, and you may have decided to play, maybe, Soundgarden or Audioslave or Temple of the Dog. One thing I would recommend if you'd like to honor his memory is listen to his last solo album, Higher Truth. It's an exceptional album, and I don't think he got enough credit or recognition for it. And so if you haven't heard that album, I would really recommend, if you'd like to, honor his memory, go listen to that album and check out the other solo albums too. And anyways, that's all. I wasn't even sure I was going to do this video here because what do you say, really? What do you really say? At any rate, though, it's a real loss to rock. It's a real loss to music. And, at least we do have the music to listen to that has been left behind. This is TJR, and I think I'm going to end this video here. Please leave your thoughts on the passing of Chris Cornell and the music that he's left behind. And just remember, there's lots to live for. And just be good to each other. Peace.